about ideas for entrepreneurship and reflected them against current trends, it's time to bring in another key component of entrepreneurship, namely the customer. The customer is absolutely crucial to successful entrepreneurship, but unfortunately, some entrepreneurs make the mistake of taking their eye off the customer. Remember our juggling metaphor? We need to keep both the idea and the customer up in the air at all time and address each one regularly so that we can make sure that the idea actually creates something of value for the customer. Keep in mind also that both the idea and the customer can and will change. Your idea will evolve as you refine your thinking in the process of entrepreneurship. And although you may have started out with one customer segment in mind, you may change that. And don't forget, your customers may also change with new norms and trends. So let's think about your customers. What is the customer's problem that you're trying to solve? Who exactly are your customers? What do they look like? What do they think? Where are your customers? How many are there? How do they view your product or service? And how do they believe your product or service is different from what's already out there? There are a lot of questions you should be asking yourself at this point. And it may be tempting to take too broad a view when answering these questions and assuming that everyone, or at least a whole lot of people, will want to buy your product or service. But it's usually a better idea to focus on a smaller, well-defined group of customers with very specific characteristics, because thinking about these characteristics will help to sharpen your thinking. Most successful businesses start out serving a narrow group of customers and gradually grow so that they can serve several larger groups. It's going to be absolutely impossible for you to answer all these questions once and for all before you develop and launch your new product or service. That's why it might be a good idea to get out there and talk with some prospective customers and get their view on things. This is what we call market research. Or get out there and conduct some experiments to find out what actually works. This is what we call prototyping, and we'll be talking about that later in the course. Leading on from the idea of market research with customers and experimentation leads us naturally to thinking about customer validation. It's very important to get validation that your customers are actually going to find value in your idea. There are some very good tools out there to approach this in a systematic fashion. One such tool is the experiment board or validation board. I'm now going to ask you to watch a presentation I made a few years ago to a conference of designers. In this presentation, I talk about the phases of competition and the importance of creating an experience for customers. This leads us to the next important component of entrepreneurship, which is meaning.
Okay, we've been talking about design here today, and I want to try to stretch your thinking a little bit to what some people have alluded to but not really discussed in a great length, and that is, what do you design when there is nothing, no thing to design? So namely, the design of services. We've already heard today that services are 70-80% of the jobs in Europe, the economy. I've been doing research on Icelandic technology-based firms. 95% of them gain at least half of their income from services. So this is very relevant for Iceland. And so the question I want to try to talk about for a few minutes is, what do you design if there is no thing to design? And my proposition is that successful service design yields a compelling experience. And an experience, that's even worse than design. There's no definition. It's very ephemeral. It could happen. It may not happen. You're all sitting here, but that doesn't necessarily mean you're listening to me. It's that kind of thing. It's something that you really don't have control over. So starting off with some of the background for this, if we think about the phases of competition, and of course I'm talking about this as a person from business, not a designer. So I'll take you through a little bit of business speak for a moment. The phases of competition for products or services starts in the upper left-hand corner where we have the technological innovation phase. This is where a new technology is created or developed and adopted by the market. Let's think about computer mice. I'm sure you all own a mouse. Who doesn't own a mouse? Everybody has a mouse. Back in the day when this was the new technology, this was in the early 80s, I guess. First of all, there was the development, of course, of the mechanical object itself, which used to have a ball inside that if it accumulated lint, you had to take it out and clean it, otherwise nothing worked. But the most important technology that was kind of the cornerstone or the reason why we have mice is the ability to move a cursor on a screen. And the fact that you can actually move a cursor on the screen and the stuff underneath doesn't disappear. That took a lot of technology. So anyway, everybody started buying mice. Mice were expensive at the time. They were not ergonomic. They were ugly. They had first just one button. But people became enamored of the idea of being able to move cursors on screens. It just gave a new level of control to the computer. Then we move to what's called the improvement phase. This is where things start to become more reliable and more consistent. Like I said, the first mouse I had, which was on an Apple IIe, I believe it was, rather than a Macintosh, had one button. Then there was the 2-button mouse, the 3-button mouse. There was buttons with scroll bars. We've gone through a lot of basically experimentation with what's the best way to design a mouse. But nowadays, pretty much you buy a mouse and you know what the left button's going to do for you, what the right button's going to do. And that's because that we have created norms for what the mouse should do. So it's consistency. They became more reliable. The lint problem, for instance, was gradually fixed by going to new technologies. Next is the maturation phase. This is where differentiation is based on convenience. This is where we get first we get carpal tunnel syndrome, and then we get ergonomic mice. So we got larger mice that are specially shaped to fit the human hand. And as those became more and more popular and more accepted, basically now all mice are to some extent ergonomically formed. So what happens in the lower right-hand corner is, right there in the category with death and taxes, is the commoditized phase. It's where differentiation, quite frankly, is based on price only. So you need a mouse, and the only issue, is what does it cost? Because you can expect a mouse to do certain things in certain ways and provide a certain level of ergonomic excellence. So based on some research that I did along with my colleague Rökkvaldur Sæmundsson, we developed this concept of a possible speed bump on this way to death, taxes, and commoditization, which is what we call the symbolic value phase, where differentiation is based on experiences. And I'm going to continue with my mouse, and I realize this is not a service example, but I believe it's a very tangible example that will help you understand what I mean. I was in the U.S. last year for a conference, and I was, ever at the last minute, ever Icelandic, working on my presentation late the night before I was going to present, 8 o'clock in the morning. And I have a mouse crisis. My mouse literally dies. There was nothing I could do for it. I had the computer I usually travel with, which has a really, really bad thumb pad. I just can't deal with it. And I was setting up a diagram, something like this one, and I needed a mouse. So I jump in my rental car, and I go out to the local Target. For those of you who haven't been in a Target, it's a huge store, American store, that sells everything from aspirins to tires for your cars. I go into the Target. I know they have mice. I have seen mice in Target. After getting lost a few times and asking around, finally I'm in aisle, 39F, the mouse aisle. And at this point, it's late in the evening. I have a presentation to prepare. My sole purpose with my trip to Target was, I need to get a mouse, fast. A mouse is a mouse. I don't care. I just need a mouse. So I go, and this is, last year. So the Icelandic krona, as we've all talked about today, is not the best thing to have in your pocket. So I also had the objective of buying something for not a lot of money. So there's aisle 39F, the mice. I quickly zero in on the laptop mice, the smaller mice, and I quickly scan the prices. There's $19.99 and there's $29.99. Okay, $19.99, that's me. I look at the mice. Okay, what do I want here? I want cordless. What's cordless? All of a sudden, my eye strays, like it never should, to the $29.99 area. What are they offering? You know, all of a sudden, the urgency slows down a bit. I wonder what you get for an extra $10 in a mouse. And I look at this display of mice from Logitech, and see, the brand is completely by the way here. And they had a lot of mice, like this one. This is the mouse I bought. They were in different colors, which is, they were all available in colors. But they not only had different colors, but they also had different patterns on the front. Now this is interesting. Color and pattern. So all of a sudden I shift from my target-oriented, get it for as little money as possible and do it quickly mode into quiet introspection. And I start thinking about, now if I were picking one of, still haven't made the commitment to spend the extra $10 plus tax, but I'm thinking if I were picking one of these mice, which one of them would I pick? You know, which one of them says Marina? And all of a sudden, complete mind shift, start thinking about, well, what would I like my life to be? Who would I like to think people to think I am? And I had these wonderful 5 minutes there on aisle 39F in Target, picking out, a mouse in my favorite color, and that has a pattern, which for those of you who can see it, probably not nobody, is kind of like the pattern of a pebble falling in a calm pool of water. So kind of zen, kind of peaceful, kind of a life where I don't have to rush out to Target to get a mouse almost in the middle of the night. So I walked out of there with $29.99 plus tax instead of $19.99 plus tax, and it was money well spent because I got that little bit of time of introspection. Now think about it. The people at Logitech who designed these mice, were they thinking about this? Were they thinking about this possibility, this 39F aisle possibility? I don't know. I hope they were. But think about all the other people who also went to Target and did not get the 10-minute bonus. So like I say, the whole creation of experience is very, very ephemeral. It may not happen, but you can still think about it. No discussion of experience is legal unless Pine and Gilmore are mentioned. And they came up with the idea of the experience economy. And basically their model looks like this. In the lower left-hand corner, you had the extraction of commodities. This is like pumping oil from the ground. There is a market price. We all know about the market price of oil. We here in Iceland at least, we know whether it's going up or down. And we look at the gas stations to see if it's being reflected. There's really no differentiation. I'm not a petroleum engineer, so I'm not sure if there's really a difference between what you pump out of the ground in Texas or what you pump out of the ground in Egypt. I just don't know. But the differentiation is not huge. Then we go up to manufacturing products. This is where you create, fuel for cars, and you create the Super H fuel and you brand it Shell or something. I don't know anything about fuels. You get a little more opportunity for premium pricing. You get a little more opportunity for differentiation. Then you go up to delivering services. This is the gas station, ranging all the way from the self-service gas station, where it's just between you and the pump and your credit card, to the full-service gas station where you can also buy something to eat, and there's a human being who you can talk to if the pump or the credit card doesn't work. But basically, they're all delivering the same service at different prices. They differentiate depending on how much service they're delivering. And they can do various things to make, gas stations are different. Yeah, it depends who's running them and where and so on. And then at the top is staging experiences. And this is where buying gasoline from your car becomes poetic, okay? I don't know what that looks like. This is a thought exercise you can take home. What would it take to make buying gas poetry?
I still have that mouse, by the way. In the presentation, I talked about symbolic value and experience. A term we can use to cover both of those is meaning. A product can have symbolic value, which gives it meaning. If you include an experience in your service, it also delivers meaning. Now, I realize that you could create a product or service without giving it any particular meaning, and in some cases that may make sense. But I would argue that in most cases, your odds of success are better if you include meaning. Think of it as wrapping your product or service in meaning. So now you have 3 things to juggle as an entrepreneur: your idea, your customer, and crucially, the meaning that you will deliver to your customer. At this point in the entrepreneurship process, it might be a good idea to spend some time online. Google your idea or words that describe it. Does it look like somebody else is providing a similar product or service? Next, Google words that describe your meaning. Does it look like somebody else is already providing this meaning? If you realize that you have some competitors, and you probably will, you need to give some serious thought to how your product or service can be significantly different from what's already out there. What is your competitive advantage?